Recording, Mary B. Roberts, September 13th, 1972, Blackwell, Oklahoma. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is Mary B. Roberts interviewing for the Living Legends of the Oklahoma Christian College and the Historical Society of Oklahoma City. We're in Blackwell today, September 13th, 1972, and I have here Mrs. Charles Walter Bleuler and some of her friends. I would like for them to give you their names at this time.
I'm Mrs. Bob Cronin.
You are also a member of the Board of Directors on our Historical Society here, are you not?
Yes, I am.
I'm James Carson, her nephew.
I'm Dorothy Carson, her niece.
So we hope to have a conversation today with Mrs. Bleuler, who, according to the data that I have, has the most interesting experiences to tell us of the very early days of this section of our state. I'm going to turn this over at this time to Mrs. Bleuler. Miss Bleuler, we would like to have first the names of your father and your mother, the complete names, and where they were born.
Well, my father was J. Carson, Joseph J. Carson, and my mother was Emma Stouffer Carson, and they were born in Kentucky.
And they came to Oklahoma.
Come to Oklahoma at the opening of the Cherokee Strip. And we've lived here ever since. Of course, I married and went away, and then I've come back here now.
Did you come with them? Or
Oh, yes. Yes, I went to school here for a while.
In Blackwood?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us something about the move out here?
Well, it was just a regular move. They were out here on a farm, just joined town on the south. And the 160 acres with a nice house on it, 6-room house. And I went to school here for a few years.
Could you tell us something about the run of 1893?
I couldn't tell you too much about that because I was too young to remember anything about that.
About how old were you?
Oh, I was about 14. A young lady.
But you came a little bit later.
Well, I didn't come right with my father, but yes, It was right here at the...
Was your father in the run, Mrs. Bleuler?
Well, I don't know whether he was or not.
He got an allotment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask Mrs. Cronin now to follow through on this subject, if you will, please.
I believe, yes, her father staked a claim near the Cherokee Strip during the Cherokee Strip run, and this is located on the Cherokee River out here, and it's where Hart's Floral Shop is now. And
Joins the city on the south. And it joins Blackwell on the south.
And it joins Blackwell on the south. And Mrs. Bleuler, after your father received this farm, did the church use this farm then in any way? Do you remember how he used this farm?
Well, the church didn't use it. They used to have services down there on the creek because there was shade down there.
And did they immerse?
Down the river,
They immersed.
And up in our house, changed their clothes,
They immersed new converts into the river. Okay.
It's interesting that that the church began so early here. Can you tell us something about the very beginning of your church?
I couldn't, because they were going pretty well when we came out here, the family. My father was out here quite a while before, and he remembers when they had services down on the river because they had trees down there and shade before they ever had a building. And then we had services uptown in some of the store buildings for a while.
When your father was an early member of the church there were just about 28 members in the early church, and was he an elder of the church?
He was.
And your brother George, was he in the church?
He was a deacon.
Your brother George was a deacon in the early church. Can you name the charter members of the First Christian Church? Though the other members, there were 28 members. Can you read? See those? Can you read?
Mr. and Mrs. A.H. Lee, Mr. and Miss J.S. Noggle, Miss Maggie Dobbs, Miss Lucy Phelps, Mrs. Bowen, Mrs. S.J. Smock, Mrs. F.M. Doherty, Miss J.M. Downing, Miss Flora Glidden, Mr. and Mrs. J.T. Glidden, and Mr. and Mrs. W.H. Sanders, Mr. K.C. Brown, Mr. A.C. Million, Mr. Sterling Beers, Mr. and Mrs. Ansel Stevens, Mrs. Mary Stiff, Mrs. Mary Shaver, Mr. and Mrs. J.J. Carson, and family, Mr. George Carson.
Yes, thank you. Now, how many of those are living now?
Well, I couldn't tell you, Miss Linda, all over that again.
Well, are you the only living charter member now of the?
I think I am.
Okay, yes, I think you are too, Ms. Bleuler. I think you're the only living charter member of our First Christian Church in Blackwell. Well, that was fine. Now, let's see. Now, we have some pictures here of the church as it progressed from year to year to year. And this was the very first church in Blackwell. And what was that church called?
The Church of God.
It was called the Church of God, wasn't it? And
all the different denominations had services there.
yes. And this was in July 1894. Then this little church was purchased by the Baptists then in 1895, and then the Christian church held services in a one-room building on South Main, where Safeway is now located. And now then, the next, we purchased then lots on First and McKinley in 1897 and built a frame building. And is this the picture here of that church that was in 1897?
Yes, it is. This is the picture.
And that's the way the church looked in 1897.
Uh-huh.
The membership at that time was 120. Reverend George Pruitt was sent by the American Missionary Society to the church, and they paid 1/2 of his salary. As we said before, now where is it that they immersed or baptized the members of the church? Where was?
My father's farm adjoined town on the south, and the river run through his place. And it was there, and they changed their clothes up at our home, our house.
Okay, that's fine.
Mrs. Cronin, may I put in a question here? Thank you. This is Mary Roberts again. Tell me something about your school days. I believe you're a graduate of this school.
Well, I went to school here. I was in high school when I come out here, just was going into high school. So I had all my high school here.
And you graduated.
Uh-huh. There was just 2 in my class, and that was Nellie Beatty and myself.
Then you were the first graduates of Blackwell High School, is that right?
That's right.
You were the very first one.
Uh-huh.
Did you have a commencement exercise and everything?
Yes.
Tell us about it.
Well, I can't tell you very much about it because she was more apt to get up and talk and say things than I was, so I let her do it. Nellie Beatty did the talking of our early day.
So she took care of the commencement exercises there. And you have your diploma?
No, they didn't issue.
They didn't issue diplomas then. But it's the same, you had completed your course of study satisfactorily and were a graduate.
Well, I was, yeah.
Of the first year of Blackwell High School. That's wonderful.
They told me those first records were burned.
Oh, really? The first records were burned. Do you know how many are in the school now, or about how does that compare to the way it is today? Could you give us, Ms. Randa?
Yes. Well, I think there's pretty near 200, 150 to 200 in their graduating classes now. So it can from 2 to 100 and we'll say 80. It has really grown. Blackwell has really grown.
You were Myra Carson. Was that your name before you were married? Tell us something about the difference in the amusements of the young people then and what we suppose they are now.
Well, we made most all of our amusements ourselves in our homes, in our yard, and we had a tennis court, and the whole gang played tennis down there. Even the preachers came on Monday and played. And then the river run through our place, and we had a boat on the river, and that was fun too. And sometimes a little draw up around the house got full of water, and the boat would come clear up as far as our house was.
That was when you had the overflows.
Yes, the overflows and the backwater, you know.
Tell us something about some of the experiences that you had with some of those big overflows before we had our drainage system here.
Well, it wasn't too much. We enjoyed it, having water that close to us, because that draw run right up close to our house. And we enjoyed having it full of water.
Brought the boat home.
We even had a boat up there. Yes, that's true.
Was there much fishing?
No, I don't remember the fishing very much.
You were just too busy paddling around in that boat.
Yeah. Yes, we didn't. I don't remember too much fishing.
You were a young lady. If you came here when you were 14, you were a young lady in the years of your high school and until your marriage. Tell us something about the dating customs of those days. How did you meet that husband of yours?
Well, that's kind of hard to do. I met him. He was Walter Bleuler, and he came here from Chicago, secretary and treasurer of the Blackwell Mill, and I thought it was quite an honor to go with him. Dating.
He was the cat of the town,
Yes,
wasn't he?
and I married him.
Oh, now that settles it.
That's good, wasn't it? Did you put up ice?
This is Mrs. Cronin.
Oh, this is Miss Cronin again.
Yes, we did.
Did you have
It's a nice house.
Did you have an ice house?
We had a nice house, and summer times we had watermelons in there, and we'd take a wagon load of watermelons, and put them in that ice house on the ice, and then we had ice to make ice cream and different things. We put up the ice. The ice was cut there on the river in our place.
Could you tell us something about that operation of how they cut the ice and how they preserved it?
Well, they preserved it just by awkwardness. What I mean is they cut big chunks out and take it up there and put it in sawdust, and keep it until they wanted to use it. Had a big house to put it in.
It was awfully good in July, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Mhm.
Well, okay, this is Miss Bob Cronin again, and now in 1907, the congregation then in the church had outgrown the little building that they had built, and so the building was sold that year to the United Brethren and moved off the lots. And so then a new brick building was erected then that year, and that's September 28th, 1907. Now, is this the brick building that they started building?
It's got the cornerstone there with the dates on it.
Yes, and it was built in 1907.
1907.
Yes.
And it was added on to afterwards.
Yes. Now, when it was added onto or enlarged or remodeled, that was isn't this the picture in 1937 and 38 when it was?
Yes, of course, this is part of it too. So
Yes.
here's this part here. Yes, that's very much like it.
But this looks like it after it was enlarged or remodeled. Fine. Let's see. All right. Then the church continued to grow, and it was necessary to purchase a parsonage at 304 West McKinley, and so they did this. And the membership of the church then, again in 1954, began to build a new building and start a new building program. And the first one raised approximately $130,500 in funds, and the second one was $40,000. And so now, is this the, and then the church again was sold. This church here was sold again to the United Brethren. Is that right, Mrs. Bleuler?
That's right.
And so then the present church side, and here is when this was the groundbreaking ceremony. Were you there, Ms. Bleuler?
Yes, I was. I was there at the groundbreaking ceremony. All these people in their cars.
And was this on June 1st, 1958?
Well, I did.
It was. I think it was June 1st, 1958, when they had the groundbreaking ceremony.
We were so proud that we had that ground and was going to start a new church.
And this is at 306 East Coolidge. 306 East Coolidge.
306 East Coolidge.
That's where it is the
Sure it
present
is now.
day. And this is the present day church.
That's
isn't
it, exactly.
That's the present day church.
First Christian Church.
And do you know who our minister is now? Our minister of the church is now?
Reverend Davis?
Yes.
Yeah.
Reverend Lou Davis and his family now reside there at the church. Okay.
In my history, I got all the preachers.
Yes, that's right. Now, listen, would you like to name all of the ministers here? And could you read down the list of ministers that we've had from the very beginning down? And that starts over here.
The very first one was all H.W. Robertson that used to come in here from somewhere and walk for miles and miles and miles to get here to preach on Sunday. That was 93 to 96, and then the next one was Rehorn. This has got reborn, but it's Rehorn. And that was 1896. And you want me to read the rest of them?
Yes, go ahead, read it.
George Pruitt in 1897. That was one of our first resident preachers. And then we had Reverend McMahon in 1898, Neil Day in 1899, C.E. Radford in 1900, C.H. Hilton 1902, D.W. Marr 1903, and Z.A. Harris in 1904. Why we didn't keep him in longer, I don't know. George McQuitty in 1907, and I think that's where we built the church. Reverend Weimer in 1909, and L.A. Beard in 1911, Z.A. Harris in 1912, and then he was back again in 1915. Want me to read the rest of them?
Yes, and then those up here.
Roy Harp, 1916-18, Reverend Hodges, 1821, J.T. Ogle, 22 to 26, Frank Walters, 27 to 29, Carl Wilhelm, 30-34, E.H. Harrison, 35 to 42, and Jack Oliver in 43 to 45, Harold Stein, 46 to 47, Harold Abraham, 48 to 50, Bert Sutton, 51 to 57. He was here the longest of any of them. Harry Hembry, 58 to 61, Floyd Deem, 62 to 63, John Down, 63 to 71, and Lou Davis, who's there now, 1971.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is your interviewer, Mary Roberts. Could you tell us something about how they raised funds for some of those old churches? Did you have ice cream socials or?
Very much so. We had dinners and ice cream socials, and sometimes we had dinners downtown in the store buildings downtown so the whole town could come and we could raise more money, and we just raised it every way we could. Ice cream socials out on the lawn of the church, and it was fun. It wasn't hardship. It was fun raising money for our church.
Did any of your group ever participate in what they call quilting?
Well, not my bunch didn't.
I thought maybe they sold those quilts or auctioned them off. I remember some of the early churches did that.
I think some of the groups did make quilts, but not the one I belonged to.
Do you want her to give the list of the associate ministers? Okay, or full-time Christian church. Okay. Now she was.
Didn't Mrs. Bleuler write a history of the church?
No, I did. Yes, she wrote.
I hope that you put that in your historical society here as well as in the files of your church, because those are things that are.
Charter member, and of course I am a charter member, and I did write it, or no one else would have known about a lot of these things.
That's right. I wanted to give you credit for that, and also show them where it could be found, where it could be gotten. We'd like to get back now to some of the old times in Blackwell, some that you remember. What are some of the more exciting events, or fearful events maybe, that you have lived through here in Blackwell?
I can't think of any fearful events. We had lots of fun. Early day was a lot of fun. Everybody had a lot of fun, and everybody was joined in with it. Mhm. Can you think of anything?
I said, was there any saloons in the Blackwell in early days?
Oh,
We don't have
goodness,
now.
I don't know. I wouldn't tell about that if it was.
We take it there were. I wonder if you could tell us something about some of the services that were held. Has your church service changed very much in its way of its conducting and so on?
No, I don't think so. Church service hasn't changed too much from the way it was then, the way it is now. Of course, we try to cooperate with the other denominations when they have anything, and they cooperate with us.
I believe our churches have changed in that we don't scrap each other. We try to cooperate.
That's true.
I think that's an improvement.
Can you remember when the church got their first organ?
And I'll have to think about that. I remember them getting it, but
Mrs. Cronin, perhaps.
They got a very new pipe organ just recently, which was given as a memorial to Stephen Rogers, and this is in our new church now, in the new sanctuary, and it has 1,197 pipes, and it adds beauty through its wonderful tones to our worship service. Ms. Bleuler, did you, before 1922, you were in the Christian Women's Board of Missions, is this right?
yes, that's right. That's what we called it then.
And then in 1922, the name was changed to read the Women's Missionary Society. And you were a co-worker in the Women's Missionary Society.
Yes, I was.
And at the present time, we have the Christian Women's Fellowship. And the Christian Women's Fellowship was started in 1951. Is this right?
That's right. As far as I know.
And have you worked on the church board, Mrs. Bleuler?
Well, I think I've been a member of it ever since we've had one.
Yes, many years, haven't you? And did you drive a car for many years?
Yes, I did.
What type of cars did you drive?
Somebody tell me what kind did I? Chevrolet.
So you had a Haynes?
A what?
Roadster? No, the first car was a white steamer.
That's the truth.
Give us that. Give us that again. Was a what?
White,
First car was a.
white steamer.
It was.
And that's a long time ago.
Yes.
We had to put water in it, you know, and have fire under it. And sometimes we'd get out on the road and we'd run out of water, and we'd have to stop and use somebody's pump.
Go borrow the water to get going again.
Yes, get going again, get it hot enough to boil.
And you came all through the automobile business then, and your last car you drove was
That's the one I've got now. What is it here?
Chevrolet.
Chevy.
Chevrolet.
Do you still drive?
Oh, yes. Well, I hope so. Mercy on us.
Yes. Until you came out here. Did you? I'll ask you this. Ms. Bleuler, did you work on the Living Link from 1950 to 51? Do you remember about that, helping Mrs. Venita Veers Whitmer?
Yes, yes, she was our living link in our church.
Yes,
Would you explain what the living link is? How do you?
Well, I don't know if there's anything to explain. She was the one we supported in her missionary work.
Oh, from your church.
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's what.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a special name for them, so I didn't recognize
Uh-huh.
that.
Well,
yes.
we did at that time.
It's called the Living Link. Then, were you a deaconess emeritus in 1968?
I think so.
Yes.
Mrs. Bleuler, weren't you didn't you work for a while?
Oh, yes.
Tell us about it.
Worked all my years. I worked.
What did you do?
Oh, I worked downtown in one of the stores, and then I worked for the charity office,
Welfare.
and then I was the director of the charity office here in Blackwell.
For how long?
Oh, mercy on us.
20 years.
At least 20 years.
Were there any interesting cases or anything that you would care to discuss?
Well, I wouldn't like to right now this way without thinking about them.
Or how was it funded? By the government and the county, or how?
Well, we had our organization there.
Yes,
Of course, I guess the city gave to it.
I think so.
I don't remember who paid my salary. I think the city did.
Usually those are funded by the city, the county, and the government, the federal government, is the way it is now. I'm not sure how it was 20 years ago. County, or how?
Well, we had our organization there.
Yes,
Of course, I guess the city gave to it.
I think so.
I don't remember who paid my salary. I think the city did.
Usually those are funded by the city, the county, and the government, the federal government, is the way it is now. I'm not sure how it was 20 years ago.
Well, I think it was by the city and our own board. We had a charity board here.
I remember reading in the papers not long after I came to Oklahoma about a storm here at Blackwell. Do you remember anything about 1955, about a tornado or a storm that came at that time?
No, I couldn't tell you anything about it. They'd know more about it than I would. See, I married and went away for a long time.
Oh, that was the tornado, Aunt Myra, that you worked at and took care of so many people.
Just a minute, let me turn this over to your niece.
That was the tornado, you know, that tore up the east part of town that she's talking about.
Oh, I see.
And you remember about that and how you worked down at the charity office for over 24 hours without going home, giving out clothing and blankets and everything. Go ahead and tell about it. Storm.
Well, it was a storm that just tore down half of our town. And of course, we just had to take care of a lot of people for clothing and bedding and just about everything else, for food and everything else. All the east part of town was torn out.
Was your church bothered at that time, or did the church?
No, it wasn't torn up any. No.
I wish I'd have thought about this. Let me know, because I would have maybe thought of it. I wonder if you could describe, you said that you had a tennis court and you played tennis. I wonder if you could describe the costumes that you wore for, say, what we consider sports costumes today and so on.
Oh, shirtwaists and skirts.
Long skirts.
Yeah.
You tell them about it.
No, we just wore skirts and separate blouses. And sometimes they were pretty long, and sometimes they were pretty tight, and sometimes it was hard to run in them, but we run.
Did you ever play in tennis shoes, or did you sometimes just use your high heel shoes?
Mm-hmm. Yes, used the same old shoes we wore every day.
I wondered if perhaps you could describe someone dress or outfit that you had a long time ago. Do tell us about something that you wore.
I can't remember that.
Perhaps you remember some of the styles then, some of the things they wore.
I don't remember too much about it being so different from what it is today, except that they didn't wear the dresses quite so short.
That's true.
And
They've been through many changes in cycles, haven't they?
yes, they have. Of course, we tried to keep up with them all.
Yes. Mrs. Cronin?
Okay. Yes, Ms. Bleuler. Was there an opera house in Blackwell in the early day? Do you remember about this?
Yes.
Well, could you tell us about this?
Well, it was just built out of native lumber that, in the weather it shrunk and had big cracks in it and everywhere. You couldn't quite walk through the cracks, but you could sure see through them. And we had a stage, and we had plays, and we had home talent, and we had plays come here.
The lady in the checkered coat, is that you? Are you Miss Robin?
Yes. Yes.
Well, you're supposed to.
All right. That didn't be good. You were telling us about that opera and the plays.
Oh, yes, we had what we called an opera house. It was made out of native lumber, which shrunk until you couldn't walk through the cracks, but you could sure see through them anywhere. And we had a stage, and we had hometown plays. And sometimes plays come here, but we had a man and his family living here at that time that had put on plays, and they were a great help to us to put on plays.
Did you have any movies begin? I suppose the first movies probably that came here.
I remember the very first one. It was in this same opera house, and I can remember when those horses started to trot and race down the field and come right toward me. I thought they was going to come off the stage and come right down the audience. They didn't, but then that's the way they looked to me, the very first ones.
And that was a silent movie then?
Yeah.
Do you remember the name of that movie?
No.
That's too long ago.
Yeah.
I thought it would be interesting to remember some of the silent movies.
Did you read it then? Did you read the silent read the silent movie?
The title.
Oh, yes.
You read it and you saw it.
Sure.
They were printed on the picture
Mm-hmm.
at the bottom.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Then, Ms. Bleuler, were you ever a Sunday school teacher?
Oh, yes.
Many years, probably. Do you have a daughter, Ms. Bleuler?
Yes, I do.
What is her name?
Her name's Betty Braden.
And where does she live?
Where's my Betty live? Oklahoma City? Hutchinson. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And do you have a nephew, and is he here today?
Yes, he is.
Okay. What is his name?
His name's Jim.
Well, come over and speak to us.
Okay, it's Jim Carson, and I live in Oklahoma City.
Perhaps you have something you could add to us, Mr. Carson. It's hard to remember everything. Perhaps you can help her with some of her.
Aunt Myra, can you recall in the early days part of your entertainment getting in a buggy with a bunch of young people and going to Kildare, and how far away it was?
Oh, yeah.
And what you did over there, what kind of socials or parties you had?
Well, if we'd ever hear them having an ice cream social over there, we'd get in a wagon, a whole bunch of us, and go over there, 'cause that was quite an occasion. And many a time we've gone out after watermelons and had the car so full that we didn't have any place to put our feet for the watermelons we took out of patches.
Can you remember going to Kildare to take the train before Blackwell had
Oh,
service?
mercy, yes. Had to go to Kildare. Had to go to Kildare to catch a train to get out of town. Sure did. 14 miles over there, too. Take a stagecoach going over there, run over there regular to meet the train.
A stagecoach. Tell us something about the stagecoaches of those days.
Oh dear, I can't tell you anything about them. They were very comfortable to ride in, kind of big.
2 seats or 4?
Did they have 2 seats or 4? I don't remember. Maybe 4. I don't know.
Facing each other.
But a good many people could get in them. Of course, if Kildare was 14 miles, you know.
That was a good distance then.
Tell them about the Aunt Myra, tell them about the halfway house and where they changed horses.
Oh. Well, there's a farm out there about halfway between here and Kildare. And there was where we'd have to stop and change horses. Always kept a horse there so we could pick one up that was rested enough to come on the rest of the way and leave one to go out on pasture. You said what you want?
Do you have another nephew in Oklahoma City, Ms. Bleuler?
Yes, Bill Robertson.
And do you have a niece? You have 2 nieces. One is here right now. Who is here right now with you?
Let me listen, please. Dorothy Carson.
Okay. Dorothy, would you like to say?
Well, I can remember some of the things that you've talked about, not at the very first after the strip was open, but I remember that little church that, or when we started to build our brick church, I remember that we went to church in a store building downtown while we were waiting for the brick church to be finished, and the big day that it was when we moved into the brick church. Do you remember that? And do you remember in the Opera House the time that they put on the Tom Thumb wedding? That was a big thing. Somebody came here from out of town and put it on, and they had all the children in town. They had some little boy be the groom and a little girl be the bride, and then they had all the children came and they divided them up into groups and had different kinds of dances and so on and so forth. I thought perhaps you remembered, but it could be that you weren't here at that time, that you and Uncle Walter were somewhere else. But that was one of the early entertainments that I can remember when I was a little girl.
What is your husband's occupation? What was your husband's occupation?
He was here in the Blackwell mill when I married him.
And you have another niece, Myra Kelly, is this right?
Yeah, that's right.
And do you have a grandson? What is his name? Michael. It's Michael Braden, and he lives in Hutchinson, Kansas. I know that's right, isn't it? Okay, Dorothy.
She has another nephew, my brother, who lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and he should be named too.
These are all good things for the genealogical group, you know. Is there anything else that you would like to tell us about? Some other experience that you think of? Some personal experience?
Well, that's hard to think of, you know.
I know.
Like this.
Maybe your nephew or niece can help you out.
Can you think of anything I should tell them? Well, that's the way it is, you see, when you try to do it this way.
Well, we certainly thank you, Ms. Bleuler, for all of these memories, and we appreciate knowing all about the history of the church from the early day, from 1893 till this is 1972.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Cronin, and Mrs. Bleuler, we appreciate your help on this so much.
Well, I don't feel like I did very much.
It will be worth a lot to us, just a great deal. You know, it's not very often that we get old-timers that can go back this far.
Is that right?
Yes, and we appreciate so much getting you today. Thank you, Mr. Cronin, and thank you, Dorothy, for your help on this. We appreciate it so much. This is Mary Roberts signing off from Blackwell, Oklahoma, September 13th, 1972. And thank you, correction, please. My thanks in that last statement went to Mrs. Cronin, and I interchanged the name. Her niece's name was Mrs. Carson. Thank you. Mary Roberts signing off. This is Mary Roberts speaking. This is Mary Roberts speaking. A letter from Mrs. Cronin has asked that these names please be added to this tape. Her husband's name, Mr. Bob Cronin, and I believe he's also the president of the Old Settlers of Blackwell, and of course her name, which I mentioned at the beginning of the tape, Mrs. Virginia Cronin, Miss Robert Cronin, and then her grandmother's name, Mrs. Dora Goodson, and she'd like to have her mother's name down, Mrs. Lawrence S. Cannon, or Miss Jenny Cannon, and her father's name, Mr. Lawrence S. Cannon. I'm glad to make this addition. Thank you. Mary Roberts signing off.